أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغه مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات اللهم صل For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja. Inshallah, starting from tonight, we're going to begin discussing a 5-night topic by the title of the art of dua. The dua that we find happening in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt is something that we see manifested even more so in the life and in the seerah of our first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. You find du'as that are narrated from the first Imam that are not narrated from any other companion of the Holy Prophet. And you find in the seerah of the first Imam this habit of going and reciting du'a late at night. So much so that the narrations tell us from time to time, Ali ibn Abi Talib would fall and faint in the middle of his du'a in the middle of the night. When they used to come and tell his wife Fatima about this, Fatima would respond telling them that this is a very common occurrence for Ali. Dua is part and parcel of the life of the first Imam. And that is why you find beautiful du'as like Dua Kumail, like the munajat that we will recite tonight inshallah, munajat of the first Imam, and many other du'as that come from the words and the lips of Ali ibn Abi Talib. But the important point is that when you look at the life of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Ahlul Bayt and the way they did dua, you find their approach to dua was far more nuanced and complex compared to the way you and I do dua. If they were to ask the average person, why do you perform dua? Why do you supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? They would tell you, anytime I run into a problem I can't solve, when things get really, really tough, I get really, really stuck in a particular situation, that's when I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I raise my hands and I ask Him for the different hajat that I want. How do you do this dua? Very simple. I just raise my hands and I speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And although this is valid and although this is good, when you look in the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt, you find their approach was far more nuanced. Doing dua and supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not just a process where they sat there, they opened their mouth and they just said a bunch of stuff and left. It was a far more complicated process than this. But how much do we really know about the etiquette of dua, about the significance of dua, the things that can push my dua closer to acceptance, and the things that, God forbid, can create an obstacle for the acceptance of my dua. Inshallah, tonight and the coming nights, we'll delve into this topic and we'll pose the following questions. Number one, fundamentally, if someone were to ask us, why is it that we supplicate? Why is it that we recite these du'as and supplications? What's the fundamental reason behind it? what answer would we give to that question? Number two, why do we find the du'as of the Ahlul Bayt, many of them, are quite longer than you and I might expect? On these nights, there's Du'a al-Iftitah. If you were to summarize the meaning in Du'a al-Iftitah, you might come to a shorter meaning. But the Du'a itself, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on how you recite it, will take that long. Why is it that the du'as of the Ahlul Bayt were this long? Abu Hamza Thumali, even longer in terms of du'a. Joshan Kabir, even longer in terms of the length of du'a. Number three, did the prophets of God only come to the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when things were difficult for them, when they were stuck with a particular problem? Or was it a habit of the prophets of God to always come and do du'a and supplicate, whether it was during the good times or the bad times? Number four, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say when it comes to a person who is so busy during the nights of Qadr trying to build a relationship with Allah that he forgets to ask his hajat and his requests? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ignore his hajat or requests? Or does this person have a higher status compared to the one who only comes to ask for his hajat and his requests? And number five, and finally, the one who constantly prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he does his dua, what do the angels say when they raise his dua towards the skies? Versus the one who only does dua and only prays when he is stuck in a difficult situation. What do the angels say about the latter one? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. Let's begin from here. First, we have to understand what is the purpose of dua. If you went around today and asked people, why is it that you recite these supplications that we have? Why is it that you recite these du'as that we have? You would find different answers that people will give you. There's 4 main answers that people typically give when it comes to the reason why we recite these du'as. The first of those reasons is this: Sheikh, I recite this dua because when I recite it, I'm promised a particular reward. I'm promised a particular thawab. This is the reason why I recite this dua. Well, it's not a bad reason. It's a good reason. God put that reward there so that He would incentivize you to recite this dua. So it's not a bad thing. At the end of the day, the Ahlul Bayt shared these rewards with us. Yes, that means it's a good thing. But is this the fundamental purpose as it relates to why it is that we recite these du'as? The answer is no. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dedicates a reward and a thawab to a particular deed, it's because that deed has a particular impact in your life. So this is a very critical point. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in Ramadan, come and recite verses of the Quran. Every verse you recite, it's like you've done khatmul Quran. God doesn't allocate these rewards haphazardly. It's not like God is sitting there and saying, well, let's see what we should give a high reward to today. This one looks nice, we'll choose this one. If you give charity, there's a lot of reward for it. No, there's an impact, there's an effect, there's a reason, there's a wisdom behind that reward. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this act has this type of impact in your life because I want to incentivize you, because it has a big impact, hence you will also have a big reward. It's a deeper level to this discussion. So the reward behind the deed is fundamentally never the reason why we engage in that deed. The impact of that deed is that reason. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He knows we're simple, what does He do? He incentivizes good things. Those things that are going to have good impacts in our lives, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala incentivizes them with reward and with thawab. But the thawab is not the fundamental goal here. It's not the fundamental purpose here. There's something else that is the fundamental purpose. Therefore, the first answer, though it's correct, is not the fundamental answer to this question. Let us move on to number 2. Sometimes people will say, Sheikh, it's not because of the reward. It's because when I recite this dua, my sins will be forgiven. I want to go into this night and come out purified. I want to come out a type of person who's now recited this dua, and because I've recited this dua, I'm pure. Is this the reason why you engage in these supplications, some of them very long supplications? Although this is one of the benefits of dua. But this is not the fundamental reason why we do dua and perform dua. Why? Because if I wanted my sins to be forgiven, did I need to sit there for 50 minutes and recite dua Abu Hamza Thumali? Did I need to sit there and recite Makarim al-Akhlaq? Did I need to sit there and recite dua Kumail? Technically, all I had to do was raise my hands and say, Ya Allah, forgive me. In fact, the narration of the sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, the narration of the sixth Imam says what? His narration says, when a servant of God comes and wants to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he wants to ask for forgiveness for his sins, the moment his lips start to move, he's already forgiven. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what he's going to ask for. He knows what he's going to ask for. And he's already started, his lips have already started moving. He's already forgiven. Do I need to do 40 minutes, 50 minutes? Technically, no. But there must be some purpose why the Ahl Bayt did dua in this way. Therefore, the forgiveness of my sins is a benefit of dua. It's not the number one reason why we perform these duas. Let's move on to answer number 3. Someone says, answer number 3, the reason why I recite these duas is fundamentally because in these duas, I learn more about my religion. I learn more about my faith. I get to see how the Ahl Bayt spoke of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This answer is also a good answer. It's also a good benefit of dua. But again, it's not the fundamental reason why we do dua. Because many times you might recite a dua, you may not learn anything per se that is new. Maybe you've recited this dua 50 times before. How many times have we recited dua Kumail? More times than we can count. Do you learn something new every time you recite it? Not for the average person. Now, the special servants of God, sure, but not for you and me. So this is also one of the benefits, not the fundamental reason. So you say, well then what is the fundamental reason why we perform these du'as? Why is it that this art of du'a is so significant? Why did the Ahl Bayt spend so much time in their narration saying, listen, when you want to do du'a, do it this way, do it that way. Start like this. Then after you're done, you should do this. Then when you get up and leave, you should do this. All of these, inshallah, we'll discuss over the next 4 to 5 nights. Why did they emphasize this so much? Because the number one reason why we perform these du'as and these supplications is because you're trying to build a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you want to sit down with a friend, you don't sit there and say, oh, my day, you're asking about my day? Oh, today I woke up and then things went well and then I went to sleep. That's not how you speak to your friend. When you speak to your friend, you've built a relationship with your friend, what do? You go into detail. You spend time with him or her. And the result of that is at the end of the day, when you're walking away from that conversation, you have a deeper relationship with your friend compared to before. Joshan Kabir, you can summarize all of the requests in it into 1 or 2 things. What's the 1 or 2 things? Ya Allah, khalisna min an-nar ya Rab. Isn't this the thing we say 100 times? Why do you have to say it 100 times? Can't I just say it 1 time? Yes, you can say it 1 time and it will count. But if you say it 1 time, you're just asking God for things. If you say it 100 times, you're building a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very different from one another. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to come, the Ahl Bayt wants you to come to build this relationship with them. Dua is not just asking God for different hajat and requests. That's one of the benefits of dua. But at its very core, it's about building that relationship. So how do you build that relationship? We want to go deeper into that. Before I continue, inshallah, they have a white flag in the back. Whenever they hold up that white flag, it means we have to move forward. Yes? So 3 loud salawat, and let's move all the way up to the stage, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One more loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Final salawat. Allahumma salli ala. You want to come and build a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the main purpose behind your dua. The main purpose behind your dua is not just to come and ask for things. That's okay, that's good, that's part of dua. But through that, you're doing something deeper. So when you go to scholars and you say, what does dua even mean? What does it mean for us to do dua? They will tell you, dua does not mean that you go and you ask God for things. That's part of dua. It's a benefit of dua. It's good. It's wonderful. But at the very core, what dua actually is something much deeper. What is that thing that is much deeper? The deepest thing that happens when you do dua is you acknowledge your neediness to God. You show God, I'm empty-handed. This is part of the reason why when you do dua, you open up your hands. Because the whole idea is you're acknowledging that you're not in charge. You're acknowledging there's someone else in charge. You're acknowledging you're empty-handed. Someone else is the one who has all the blessings. Someone else is the one who has all the authority. I have to go to his door. And this is why in the Quran it says dua is a form of ibadah. Dua is a form of worship. Why is it a form of worship? If I'm just asking God, oh Allah, give me this career and give me this house. Why is this a form of ibadah? It's a form of ibadah because deep down built into that, you are essentially saying, God, I don't have control over things. You have control over things. That's why I'm asking you. The request itself is the basic level of dua. What that implies, which is that you are needy and in need of Him, is the deeper meaning behind dua. So verse 60 of Surah Al-Ghafir says what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ, and your Lord has said, أُدْعُونِي, call me, أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. What does the verse say? أُدْعُونِي. Hold on to this, we're going to come back to this tomorrow. The verse says, call who? Call me. Ud'uuni. It didn't just say pray. It said call me. We're going to come back to this tomorrow. Astajib lakum. If you call me, I will respond to your dua. And then the verse continues. It says, Innal ladina yastakbiruna an ibadati. Those who are so arrogant, they don't want to come and do this dua. What do you mean they're so arrogant they don't want to come and do this dua? I thought dua is just asking for things. It says no, dua means you imply that you're needy in front of God. That's the deeper meaning behind dua. And this is why if I come and I do my dua, which means I build that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for whatever reason I don't ask God for the things that I was supposed to ask Him for. Many of us coming into the night of Qadr think to ourselves, I should ask God for this, I should ask God for this. Wonderful. None of this is bad. This is good. But you come into the night of Qadr, you forget. This person told you, make sure you pray for me. Then you completely forget. So what does the narration of the sixth Imam say? The narration of the sixth Imam says, Inna Allah yaqul, Allah says, it's Hadith Qudsi. Allah says, the one who's busy building a relationship with me, and because of that he forgets to ask me of the things he wanted to ask me for, I will grant to him the best of those things that I will grant to those who ask me for things. So there were 100 people here, they were all asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for different things. You were busy building a relationship with Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this one is more valuable. Asking's not bad, but you went to the very core. You got the core, I'll take care of the rest of it for you. You built a relationship with me, I will give you the best things that anybody else is asking for. This means the very core of dua is what? The very core of dua is just showing, oh Allah, I'm empty-handed in front of you. I've come to your door. And this is why you find in the lives of the prophets of God, this concept of dua was a constant thing. It wasn't only when they were stuck. Why? Because you're always in need of God, whether things are going well or not. If things are going in a difficult way, if I'm stuck, it's very clear I need God. That one's obvious. If things are going well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects you to have enough maturity to still sit there and say, you know what? I still need God just as much as I needed Him when I was stuck. That's why the prophets of God, when they came across difficulties, they never tried to go and fight the difficulty on their own. When things came up, you know who they went to first and foremost? Before asking this person for help and that person for help, before saying, oh, can you take care of this for me? Can you take care of that for me? They would do that. But before doing all of that, where would they go? They would go to him. The first person who has to hear my request is him. That's why the Prophet of God, Muhammadin al-Mustafa, salawatullahi wa he said what? He said, alaykum bisilah al-anbiya. You all should utilize the weapon of the prophets. What's the weapon of the prophets? He said the weapon of the prophets is dua. Because these prophets of God, with all the obstacles they had, they never tried to go and take on that difficulty and that obstacle on their own. Why? Because he knew he wasn't in charge anyways. He knew he was in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyways. So every step of the life of these prophets of God, every step of the way, you find they're praying. Even sometimes you'll see in situations where you look at their life and you say, your life is going well, what are you even praying for? He will tell you, I pray when things are difficult and when things are going well. Because either way, I need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that equation. I'm not simple and naive enough to think that I only need God when I'm stuck. I need God when I'm stuck, and then I also need Him when things are going well, because He's the one who's making things go well. You want to understand this better? I'll give you this example, because this is how we approach this issue, yes? When we're stuck, we go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When things are going well, we think we're the one who's making things go well. So they say this guy, I mean, maybe this would apply to our parking lot tonight actually. This guy, he was looking for a parking spot. Yes? Driving around looking for a parking spot. Couldn't find one. After he was finally done with it and really thought to himself, you know what? I cannot find this parking spot tonight. What did he do? He raised his hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, oh Allah, my Lord, I'm sure you're out there somewhere. Grant me a parking spot. Continue to drive around. Oh Allah, you're the one who controls everything. Oh Allah, you're the one who grants everyone their blessings. Oh Allah, grant. As he was saying this, guess what happened? He saw a car pulling out. Right when he saw the car pulling out, then he raised his hands. He said, wait 1 second, Alhamdulillah, I'm done. I don't need your help. One spot just opened up. This is how we do dua. When things are going well, we think we did it. When things get stuck, then we say, okay, now's time for dua. The prophets of God, when it was difficult and when things were going well, always went to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Nuh, in difficult situations, he goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In good times, he goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the du'as of Nuh in the Quran. Nuh, before the decree of God comes, before the flood comes, and people are making fun of him and his people, he prays to God at that point. After everything is all said and done, he's already on the ark. The ark is already going on these waves. He also prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I thought you're supposed to pray when you're stuck. He says, no, I need God then. I need God now too. This is the level of maturity that the prophets of God had. And you see this beautifully in the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. Why? Yusuf was in the palace of Zulaykha. Now these women were making passes at him constantly, so on and so forth, temptations. He raised his hands. He said, Rabbi, as-sijnu ahabbu ilayya mimma yad'unani ilay. Going to prison is better for me, more likable to me than ever falling into these temptations. But oh Allah, if you don't help me, asbu ilayhinna, I will be inclined towards it. Meaning without your help, temptations will get the best of me. وَأَكُمْ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ, I'll become an ignorant person. Okay, makes sense. Yusuf is in the palace. He doesn't have power. He doesn't have authority. He's stuck. Of course he's supposed to be praying right now. But you know where else Yusuf prays? After everything is all said and done, his father's already come back. He's one of the most powerful people in all of Egypt. Then he says, رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ. Oh Allah, you are the one who granted me all of this authority. وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. You're the one who taught me the knowledge of interpreting the dreams. Yusuf, you're done. Everything is all said and done. You don't have to pray anymore. You don't have a problem anymore. He says, no Allah, I still need you right now as well. Alhiqni bis-salihin. Put me amongst the righteous servants of yours. This is Yusuf. This idea of understanding that even when things are going well, I still have to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is something you find in the seerah of the prophets, left and right. Zakaria wants a child. What does he do? He raised his hands. He said, "Oh Allah, I want a child. My bones are becoming weak and my head is turning white with hair. Grant me a child." Nuh is stuck in a situation. He asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ayyub anni massaniya shaytanu bin nusbin wa adab. Ayyub is stuck in a situation. He goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibrahim is stuck in a situation. He goes to Allah. Everybody is going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I ask you, how often when things happen in your life and in my life, do I try to take it on my own? Let me deal with this problem. Let me tell him how it is. Let me go there and do my thing. Versus how often did I put it on him? So the prophets of God, when things used to come up, the first one who used to hear about the issue was who? Was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You and I have a habit. Well, I have to put in this effort, so I have to take care of it. You have to put in the effort. You don't deliver the results though. You can't take on the problems of life on your own. It will break your back. It will break you. So when problems come up in my life, first thing I have to do is go and put it in His hands. I need you. I need your help, your authority. Then I have to go and do my work. That we'll talk about the other nights, inshallah. There's a lot to discuss here. But the idea of always coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that you find over and over again in our narrations. And that's why the narration of the sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, says something very beautiful. Before I continue, inshallah, if we can recite salawats and please move forward. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If the brothers in the back can move forward, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Another loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. A third with the loudest of your voices. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This is why the narration of the sixth Imam is very beautiful. So when the sixth Imam shares these things with us, he's pulling from a divine knowledge that you and I don't benefit from. It's not the typical type of knowledge that you and I read in books and podcasts and so on and so on. No, this is a different type of knowledge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Imam rather, he will share with us things that a normal person is not supposed to know. So the Imam is going to say, Allah says this. Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak to you, or how does that work? You're not a prophet of God. But he's pulling from a divine knowledge. Now the Imam is going to tell you what the angels do when you perform dua. The side note here is, how is the sixth Imam saying this? It's some divine knowledge that he has. Otherwise, who's spending time with angels all the time to know exactly what they do and what they say? This is the knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt. He says, you know what? There are two different categories of people. There are those, they only come and do dua when they're in difficulty and in pain. This is not bad. This is good. But the Imam is saying, this person needs to leave this level, reach the next level. Yes? I'm in this level. I have to push myself to the next level. Said there are those, they are da'a'an. Da'a means constantly doing dua. Doesn't do dua once in a blue moon. Doesn't do dua when he gets a bill he can't pay. Doesn't do dua when he's stuck only. Does dua all the time. It's part and parcel of his life. The Imam said, when this person who constantly does dua, when he does his supplication, the angels hear his voice. When the angels hear his voice, you know what they say? They say, Sawtun ma'roof. They say, you know what? We know this voice very well. We know who he is. He's always coming and asking God. He's always coming to the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's always supplicating. Sawtum ma'ruf, that's a familiar voice. We know that voice very well. So when he does his dua, it's a lot easier. They say, we know this dua. Let it pass towards the heavens. Let it go. We know this guy. Then the Imam said, but the one only comes in praise when things get difficult. Never other times does he think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never other times does he worry about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never other times does he feel like he's in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When this one does his dua, the angels say, Sawtun gharib. What voice is this? We've never heard this voice before. He doesn't pray often. Then they turn to the person who was praying. They say, Aina kunta qabla al-yawm? Where were you all of this time? Well, things were going well. I didn't think I needed to pray or anything like that. Well, things were going well, but there was a reason why they were going well. Someone was running this show. Someone was blessing you with these things. When you woke up in the morning and you saw my heart is just beating, I don't need to ask anyone for my heart to be beating. Yes, there was someone who's running that show for you. There's someone who was blessing you with that. When you woke up in the morning and your blood was running through your veins to different organs of your body, someone was doing that. Say, when this one does dua, they say, where were you before this day? They don't stop his dua. His dua still goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is why we have this concept in the narrations, at-taqaddumu fi dua. You know what at-taqaddumu fi dua means? It means getting ahead of a problem. The idea is, when you're living life and things are going well, pray then. Acknowledge your neediness to God at that time. And then the Imam said, if you do this, when the difficult times come around and you raise your hands, your dua is that much closer to acceptance. Taqaddum, get ahead of it. Yes? When things are going well, acknowledge your neediness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that when things get difficult, then it's even easier for you to raise your hands. And this is why Al-Imam As-Sajjad, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says, Oh Allah, وَلَا تَجْعَلْنِي مِمَّنْ يُبْطِرُهُ الرَّخَاء. Don't make me that type of person that the times that are going well tricks me enough to think I'm in charge. And that I only come and ask you for help when I feel like I can't do anything on my own anymore. This is, of course, a habit that we need to break. And this is the very core of dua. The very core of supplication is beyond just asking God for things. It is acknowledging that I am in need of God 24/7. And who was it who was constantly in this remembrance? And who was it who constantly had this acknowledgement that they are constantly in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That is none but the one who was going to be struck on a night like this. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayka ya Ali ibn Abi Talib. If we can dim the lights, we'll take our hearts, inshallah, brothers and sisters, to the city of Kufa. This city that has now become a time and a city of sadness, a city of sorrow. The Ali that is living in Kufa now is very different from the Ali that lived before. Why? Because before, Ali had Fatima beside him. He had his wife beside him. So anytime difficulties came up, anytime masa'ib and calamities came up, Ali had someone to go back to. But now the city of Kufa has become lonely. Now the city of Kufa has become a place where Ali has to take on these difficulties by himself. And he's become tired at this point. You can tell at this point Ali, his soul can't stay here anymore. His soul has to fly towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His soul has to leave this world. They say Ali knew about this day coming. They say Ali knew about his martyrdom coming. Why? Because when the Prophet was reciting his khutbah for the month of Ramadan, when he came to the very end and Ali asked the Prophet a question, Ya Rasulullah, what's the best of deeds that I can do in this month? The Prophet told him, Ya Ali, the best thing you can do is refrain from sin. And then they saw tears started to fall from the eyes of the prophets. they saw the Prophet of God started to cry and the tears started to roll down on his face. Ali turned to the Prophet. He said, Ya Rasulullah, ma yubkika, what is it that's making you cry like this? He said, Ya Ali, because I know in this month of Ramadan what they will do to you. And I know the way they will struck you such that your blood will come and it will color your beard. And in those moments you will be in pain and you will be gharib. Oh Ali, I cry for those moments. What moments are those, brothers and sisters? Those are the moments that we are going through on a night like this. The narration says the final nights of Ali ibn Abi Talib, he started to go to the house of the children. Every night in the house of one of these children, until it came to this final night where Ali was going to be struck. He was in the house of Kulthum. The narration says he turned to Kulthum. He said, Kulthum, let me tell you something. I don't see myself living any longer than this. The final moments of my life have come. My father, how would you say something like this? Why would you say something like this? He said, last night I had a dream, and in that dream I saw the messenger of God and I saw the Prophet. He embraced me and he started to wipe my face with his hand, and he said, Ali, I know you have had enough. I know you've been through so much difficulty. The time of difficulty has come to an end. The time for you to come and join us has now come. Oh Kulthum, my daughter, know that the time of my life is now coming to an end. The narration says during this night he used to go out of the house, look up to the sky and look up to the stars, and come back inside again, and constantly go out and come back and sit inside again. So much so until the time of Fajr had come. This time of Fajr that Kulthum is not looking forward to, the other believers are not looking forward to. And then the narration says Ali started to leave the house. Some of the animals in the house started to make noises. Some of the animals in the house started to stop him on the way. He said, don't bother these animals. فَإِنَّهُنَّ نَوَائِحٌ. They know exactly what's going to happen on a day like this. They know exactly what's going to unfold in a couple of minutes. The narration says Ali left this house and he entered into the masjid of Kufa. And when he entered, he saw those who were sleeping. Out of his kindness and out of his compassion, the Imam started to go around to wake up every individual who was in this masjid. And of course amongst them, the Mal'un ibn Muljam as well. Wake up, it's time for Fajr. They all woke up, and then Ali starts to begin with his adhan and then starts to begin with his salat. And as he's performing this salat, the Mal'un brings out this poisoned sword and strikes Ali on the head in the middle of his salat. And then everyone heard a call out from Ali. Before he showed his pain and his calamity, he said, Bismillah wa ala millati Rasulillah. I'm leaving this world upon the faith of the Prophet. Fuztu wa rabbil Kaaba. I did what I was supposed to do. Certainly I am victorious in this life of mine. Then they saw the blood had covered everything. He took a little bit of this blood, put it on his beard. He said, Hakadha wa'adani Rasulullah. This is exactly what Muhammad, the messenger of God, told me. This is exactly what my cousin told me. He told me I would leave this world while my beard is covered with my own blood. Everyone scrambles, but of course Ali ibn Abi Talib is prepared to meet his Lord. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all of our hajat and all of our requests, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who are in difficulty and pain, the people of Gaza in particular, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees them from their difficulties and pains, inshallah. And last but not least, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our beloved 12th Imam بالنبي وآله رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.